morning and welcome to Breakfast Central this Wednesday morning. We hope that your week has been off to a great start. It does seem like Wednesday is the middle of the week, but it reminds us in some way of the weekend. I'm very excited about that. Welcome to the show. For the next 2 hours, we're looking at some of the biggest stories that have happened in Nigeria, and we'll be following up with some developing stories. I am Olive and
And I am Osalgi Ogbawan. As always, I encourage you to be a part of the conversation simply by tweeting or commenting on our social media platforms at News Central TV. Let us know your thoughts on any of the stories that we are discussing. Also on our YouTube page for those who are going to be watching us online. We, of course, have, as always, the biggest conversations happening here in Nigeria. One of the things that, of course, many people are still considering is the CNG conversion conversation. The comparison right now is to either buy petrol at 1,200 naira per liter, or to buy, convert rather to CNG and then start to buy gas for 200 naira per meter, I believe. I'm not sure what the metering, would look like, basically. And, I have said it, and spoken about this, a few times over the week, that whatever fears that the average Nigerian has about converting to CNG and driving around with a gas tank in their vehicles is a legitimate fear. Not because CNG is not used in other parts of the world, maybe not every other part of the world, but in a few other countries. Not because that's the case, but because of the Nigerian factor with CNG and the safety concerns that would always emerge with certain things. I've repeatedly said that the Nigerian government I don't think has played its role well enough to assure the Nigerian people of safety with regard to converting to CNG and then being able to use these the CNG vehicles for their CNG basically for their vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think they've done enough.
If we get to the point where we are convinced that CNG is safe, everybody will be excited. I mean, we see how long our gas lasts in your house. You buy 12 kg gas, you're not refilling for, say, another 2 months, depending on how frequently you use it. So if that's sort of what the CNG will provide, where if I buy, say, 75 liters of gas in my car, it will come up to, say, 200 naira per liter.
Per meter.
Per meter. Anyway, I don't know how the meter will be, but it'll be more cheaper and will last longer. But I think the major concern is certainly the safety concerns that have been raised.
Yeah, and my argument really is that the government, as much as it is encouraging Nigerians to convert, I don't think it has done enough to convince Nigerians and assure Nigerians of the safety of this move. And the Nigerian factor will definitely exist, with regards our being able to cross all T's and dot all I's with regards safety and safety measures across, in every sector of our being. So until we get there, and of course, until we have the Nigerian government itself maybe show that it's using CNG, it's going to be a tough sell. But anyway, let's quickly share with you what our top stories are this morning and also get into breakfast headlines.
Welcome back to Breakfast Central. A number of conversations will be had this morning. We, of course, kick-started the argument on whether or not Nigerians would prefer to buy petrol for 1,000 or maybe a little above 1,000 or buy CNG for 200 naira per meter. But these are some of the arguments, that have been started this morning. And we will delve into that much later, but we do have our top stories to share with you this morning, as well as, what's happening subsequently, as we progress with the show. But let's share with you what our top stories are. Nigeria loses 16 years economic gains under Buhari, the World Bank says, and that's what we're going to be analyzing this morning, joined by Dr. Naimeka Obiariri. Telecom firms reject 5% excise tax reintroduction. Recall that it was removed a while ago, last year to be precise. Court halts Kano local government election, bars police participation, meaning it will not be happening this weekend. And we'll be heading inside the Federal Teaching Hospital, Lokoja, to look at the staff crisis that's going on there. The newspaper front pages will be reviewed as well this morning. I will open the phone lines. Stay tuned for all these and more this morning.
Now let's begin breakfast headlines in West Africa, Nigeria, where the Supreme Court has reserved judgment in the suit filed by 16 states challenging the constitutionality of the laws establishing the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and 2 other agencies. According to the Supreme Court, the date for the judgment will be communicated to the parties. During the resumed hearing on Tuesday, Imo, Bauchi, and Osun states joined the suit as co-plaintiffs, while Anambra, Ebonyi, and Adamawa states withdrew their cases, which were subsequently struck out by the court. To politics now, the Federal High Court sitting in Kano has disqualified the chairman and members of the Kano State Independent Electoral Commission, KANSEC, from conducting the upcoming local government elections just days before the scheduled poll on Saturday. The court delivered the ruling on Tuesday in response to a suit filed by a member of the opposition All Progressives Congress, Aminu Tiga, who challenged the eligibility of the KANSEC members, including the chairman, citing their affirmation with the ruling New Nigeria People's Party, NNPP, and their failure to meet the civil service grade requirements. And the National Youth Alliance movement is advancing the cause of good governance and youth participation ahead of 2027. Aligning with the 4th anniversary of the End SARS protests, the movement seeks to empower young people and liberate Nigeria from the dominance of aging politicians who have continually recycled themselves, sidelining the youth and blocking their path to the nation's highest political offices. Still in West Africa, the medical charity Médecins Sans Frontières has suspended its operations in Djibo, a city in northern Burkina Faso, due to escalating attacks by terrorist groups. In a statement, MSF's head of West and Central Africa programs, Musa Usman, said the decision followed repeated incidents targeting health centers, water distribution points, and even MSF facilities. Now to the eastern part of the continent, Kenya's High Court is hearing Rigathi Gachagau's case to overturn his impeachment as deputy president. Gachagua, was removed from office on charges of inciting ethnic divisions and undermining the judiciary, allegations he denies. The High Court has suspended his impeachment, but both Gachagua and President William Ruto are contesting the court's jurisdiction. Now in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa has arrived in Kazan in the Russian Federation to lead South Africa's participation in the BRICS summit. The summit is held from 22nd to 24th of October 2024 under the theme Strengthening Multilateralism for Just Global Development and Security. President Ramaphosa has held a bilateral meeting ahead of the BRICS summit with His Excellency President Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation at the Kremlin residence of the race in Kazan in the Russian Federation. And that's all on Breakfast headlines. Let's move back now to Breakfast Central and get into our top stories. I am Osaogie Ogbon.
The Nigerian Medical Association has accused the medical director of the Federal Teaching Hospital in Lokoja, Kogi State, of rights violations and engaging in unfair labor practices. The Kogi State chapter of the association says that the rights of its members have continued to be abused, while the working conditions at the hospital has witnessed a steady deterioration in the last few months. Our correspondent Joshua Imari, investigating these claims, has more details.
The Federal Medical Teaching Hospital in Lokoja, the Kogi State capital. The edifice boasts of an impressive exterior, admirable to many. However, within the walls of the facility, a raging war has ensued between the hospital chief medical director and some of its staff. Also, several sections of the hospital reveal a different story, as the sections are visibly dilapidated and deteriorating.
God forbid, if anybody should have an accident and is critically ill and is taken to FTH Lokoja, that person will die naturally because of the service delivery and also the poor working condition of that hospital. Sometime in May to June, an attendant died in that hospital because of there was no light in the hospital.
Some members of the state chapter of the Nigerian Medical Association have raised serious concern, accusing the chief medical director of high-handedness and gross rights violation.
Now, what the hospital now does is this. They will take people on locum and casualize our doctors.
In a situation where a doctor is casualized for 4 years, you go every 2 months to renew your appointment. In the admin, your pension is not there, your promotion is not there, your training and retraining is not there, your arrears are not coming, you are stagnated.
Some members of the Nigerian Medical Association in Kogi State have also expressed concern over the suspension of the president of the Association of Resident Doctors at the hospital.
We cannot be comfortable if any member of ARD Lokoja, Federal Teaching Hospital Lokoja, is being victimized or seem to be victimized for union activities.
All attempts to reach the Chief Medical Director of the Federal Medical Teaching Hospital in Lokoja for comments on the issue have been unsuccessful, as he says that he's unavailable at the moment. In Lokoja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarai.
Such sad, heartbreaking realities that have been experienced there. The doctors need to be able to have a decent quality of life, work environment, to be able to dispense their duties as, the ones who save our lives. If they are going to be able to continue to do that, I'm hoping that more investigation is, being carried out, and that the work that needs to be done in this teaching hospital needs to be done, should be done rather. Now let's move. Okay, I want to say something.
I just want to point out, it's another opportunity to remind us, of every now and then we talk about what our values are as a country, and both on the federal and the state and the local government level. What are the things that we put the, highest investment in? If you look at, Kogi State or any other state across Nigeria, when the budgets are drawn up, which sectors get the
most allocation, funding,
yeah. You realize that it is government sector, and it's not government sector based on the funding for infrastructure development. It's government sector based on the lawmakers themselves, and the benefits that they would get in that time. A lot of funding that goes to these lawmakers into buying SUVs and the likes should really be redirected to healthcare and to education, and you cannot get the best out of society that doesn't prioritize these sectors.
Absolutely.
If Nigeria continues to find excuses both on the federal and on the state level why it cannot allocate money to see better healthcare facilities now, if we even remove the pay packet for doctors, better healthcare facilities, better education facilities, you would almost never see an improved society. And it's not rocket science. It's pretty simple. If you don't allocate money to it, you would not see an improved education or healthcare society.
If we talk about this health, if a number of the doctors share with you their working conditions, we remember Dr. Wairi, who unfortunately died in the elevator because they were living in this, or the work environment was not conducive, an elevator that ought to have been serviced. That's terrible in itself. Then there are those who will tell you of situations where they're using torchlights to carry out surgeries and the likes of that. If we keep having these situations, we cannot tell doctors to stop leaving the country. They will keep living. It doesn't matter how many lavish promises the government makes about making the health sector look juicy.
Definitely.
Let them be able to work in a comfortable, conducive place, not even just comfortable. Let them have the tools that they need to do their job. Because if they know that having this equipment will save this life, but they don't have it, how do you expect them to show up to work every day as their best self?
And that was the flaw that I pointed out yesterday when we discussed the houses being built for judges. It's not putting down, the Nigerian judiciary like they don't deserve, things like that. But I didn't think that it was newsworthy. It was deserving of all the fanfare. Can we have the same thing for our universities? Can we have the same thing for our healthcare facilities?
Okay. All right. Talking about the healthcare, the economy, the universities, let's talk about Nigeria's economy now. According to the World Bank, Nigeria's economy experienced a significant reversal of gains between 2015 and 2022, being the Buhari administration. Despite progress made under President Olusegun Obasanjo's and President Umaru Yar'Adua and Goodluck Jonathan, the World Bank's latest Nigeria Development Report states that the country's GDP per capita decreased by about 1/3 during this period.
The World Bank attributes the economic decline to inconsistent macroeconomic policies, contraction in the oil sector, and external shocks. The report specifically criticized President Muhammadu Buhari's administration for widening fiscal deficits and increasing debt pressures. However, the report praised President Bola Tinubu's reforms, citing improvement in foreign exchange, monetary policy, and fiscal consolidation. Now, joining us is investment banker and public affairs analyst Nnaemeka Obiariri. Good morning and thanks for joining us, sir. Good to see you.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. One of the major arguments that people have with regards to Buhari administration is that it almost had no choice. For example, when you speak about the ways and means and the 23 trillion naira that was taken from ways and means by the Buhari administration, that Nigeria cannot point to anything really that it achieved from the ways and means loan. A lot of people would say, well, the government had no choice. Nigeria was completely broke. There was nothing that the government, could have done instead, or rather, other than take those loans, including foreign loans. Do you agree with that perspective? Was President Buhari stuck in a situation where he had no other choice but to just continue to take loans to be able to run the country?
Oh, sorry again. Those who put up such lame arguments do not understand how economies work. Buhari did not inherit a dead economy. And I want us to look at the numbers, factual and empirical. The World Bank report is 110% spot on. Buhari did not inherit an economy that was dead. When Buhari became president, Buhari inherited a country that had a GDP of a foreign reserve of about $29 billion. Buhari inherited a country that was producing average of 2.4 million barrels of crude oil every day. Buhari inherited total national debt profile of 12 trillion naira, total external debt position of $10 billion. It was unlike what Obasanjo inherited when he became president in 1999. Obasanjo's case was worse. Obasanjo inherited a country that had a national reserve of $5 billion, $3.9 billion in Cumbad, 1.7 million barrels crude oil production a day, and a country that was a pariah nation with a serviceable debt position of $32 billion. But he went to work, recruited some of the best technocrats, and reversed the fortune. Basically, what World Bank said, Buhari destroyed this economy. He set us back 50 years, not just 16 years. What did he do? I will enumerate it line by line. Firstly, crude oil output was 2.3 million barrels a day. Crude oil price never went below $35 per barrel. It was about $42, $56 average. Under Obasanjo, for the first time of Obasanjo, crude oil price hovered between $17.35 to $28. So it was a different case. He had an economy that was still had a positive GDP growth of about 3%. The first thing he did that got us back to where we are today was if he wanted to tamper with the amnesty program of the Niger Delta people. He was warned. Of course, in his obstinacy, he continued. By the time the militants went into the creeks and started bombing the assets, output came down to 1.1 million barrels a day. In fact, if not that he was ill for 104 days, that gave Oshibanjo the opportunity of negotiating and stopping the madness, we would have been even worse than we are today. The second thing he did with Emefiele was that for the first time, Nigeria was one of the two countries that we are allowed to list our debt instruments on the JP Morgan Chase and Barclays bond index. It provided a two-way transparent quote window that allowed investors to bring in their monies and gauge their risk and return. The first thing Buhari and Emefiele did was to first of all create multiple exchange rate windows that created room for arbitrage and massive criminality of round-tripping a number of criminality within that sector. JP Morgan warned us, every other international investor warned us, we refused. Immediately JP Morgan Chase yacked us from that index. Barclays followed suit. And the foreign investor could not see any transparent window to be able to invest in Nigeria. They started pulling out. Before December 2015, over $78 billion flew out of Nigeria. And that was what led to our first recession in 2016. So, and again, if you look at the oil and gas sector, which is our working capital, Kachukwu Ibe was doing a good job as GMD of NNPC. The first thing Kachukwu did was to do an audit and clean up of the criminality in the downstream oil and gas sector. When we are being told that we consume 45 to 52 million liters of PMS a day under the Ziani, Kachukwu was able to trim it down to 35 million liters a day. For whatever reason, Kachukwu was removed and Mike Antiparu came in. Under Buhari as petroleum minister, before you knew it, the numbers moved to 55, to 66, million liters a day. In fact, it got to a ridiculous height in 2021 when we are being told that Nigeria imported and consumed 73 to 93 million liters of PMS a day. And which is a criminal Ponzi scheme, because if you look at the trajectory and records of PMS volume consumption across the whole world, the highest we will have seen was between that period was nations that had increased in 15 to 20%. Of course, these are nations where you had purchasing power on the rise, the economy was booming. Even at the height of our economic boom under Obasanjo, we never had consumption above 27 million liters a day. In fact, at the time, we had over 4 million middle-class population that earned between $110,000 to $150,000 a year as annual salary. But under Buhari, the number went bonkers. We were even told that, oh, it was smuggling to our neighbors. If you look at the daily consumption of PMS from Niger to Chad to Cameroon to Benin Republic, Togo to Mali, total consumption of those countries a day was about 10 million liters. So even if you add it to the plausible consumption of 32 to 38 million, there was no way. Basically what happened was they were not importing anything. They were busy playing Ponzi games, paying subsidy for what they will never consume here. And to even make matters worse, they spent 16 trillion naira on subsidy. They printed 23 trillion naira, $65 billion that are not attached to any productivity. Basically what they did, if you look at the records of export and import then, total dollar inflow into Nigeria from different sources for that 8-year period was $635 billion. Total outflow from the former window was about $452 billion. Basically what they did was they were printing dollar. They were printing naira to round $3. And that was, there was a lot of criminality that happened then. And that was why we saw an multiple exchange rate window where the official exchange from the former black market was about 200 naira. Difference under Obasanjo, under Jonathan, under Yar'Adua, the arbitrage window between the official market and was not more than $1.50. So there was no room for round tripping. Buhari and Emefiele created room for people just buying dollar and reselling dollar, using naira to buy dollar at official window, and tripping and taking it out of this country. So basically, in a Senate climb, most of those who participated in that regime should have been made to vomit money and account for their atrocious deeds. We are where we are today, and I tell you the truth. It will take this country 2 years of consistent, solid, across the 3 tiers of government, professional and creative economic practice and reasoning to take Nigeria out. Who can redeem this country? Because what he did can actually be reversed. But the challenge is the current team in power from the federal to state and local government must have to sit down and restructure this country, both from the physical and cultural point of view, and in terms of productivity, to help us recover from this mess that we have seen ourselves.
You've said that it will take the country 2 years for us to see some form of an improvement. At the Nigerian Economic Summit, we had a representative from the World Bank who told us it would take about 10 to 15 years. With what you've seen so far with how this administration has been run, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration, which interestingly said they were coming to ride on the work that President Muhammadu Buhari had started. Do you think that, first of all, the fact that they inherited a broken economy or a terrible economy or a bad economy is excuse enough, one? And with the way the administration has been run so far, are they doing things differently from how President Muhammadu Buhari did?
Olive, to be very sincere, if those in Abuja and the states and local government are sincere, patriotic, empathetic, and compassionate about the situation of over 197 million Nigerians that live under poverty and do the right thing, we can fix this economy in less than 2 years. And I will explain to you why. They are not doing what they are supposed to do across the 3 tiers of government. Firstly, this government inherited a total debt profile of about 77 trillion from 12 trillion when Buhari became president. External debt of $42 billion from $10 billion when Buhari became president. Nigeria was totally broken. The crude oil production was at 1.1 million barrels a day. But they didn't do the right thing. Of course, they had good policy pronouncements, but it was not back. Any pronouncement must be supported with underlying factors and actions that will make it work. Firstly, we have 2 focused critical sectors in Nigeria. So those sectors are the oil and gas, which are working capital economy sector, and then the agro value chain, which is the lowest hanging fruit to rescue us. because Nigeria does not yet have the technology to go to the moon or to begin to pursue things that have border on the robotics and AIs. The first thing that we must tackle is corruption and insecurity. We know under Buhari, we wasted $27 billion. When he became president, the insecurity was limited to the Northeast. By the time Buhari left, insecurity had been shared across the 6 regions. To the extent that even one of the most peaceful regions in Nigeria before Buhari became president, the Southeast became a den of robbers and bandits. What this government can do, both at the federal and state government, to rescue this country, it's very simple. Insecurity must be tackled for us to be able to go into massive productivity on the lowest hanging fruit, the oil and gas, the agri value chain. On the oil and gas sector, we need to, I will break it into two. For insecurity to be tackled, we must overhaul the current security architecture of Nigeria. What we have is a centralized, inefficient system. I've always advocated this. Nigeria has 8,809 electoral wards. Every security is indigenous. The indigenous people have that filial affiliation to protect their lives, their properties, and that of their children. In each of these electoral wards, create 100 agro rangers. 100 agro rangers that will be used to protect 500 to 1,000 hectares of agro-industrial clusters. The local government chairmen and governors, this falls within their purview. These agro rangers will come under the supervision of the National Security Advisor, the governors, and whoever that will be appointed to head it in each state, former maybe a retired military man or a former DSS director. What is their role? Properly train them, equip them with AK-47, with drones. Innocent and not can provide us with 3 armored personnel carrier in every local government area. If you have this in every ward, what we will have is about this, and these guys are going to be paid not from the fiscal revenue. We will have a security trust fund, of course, that will also have contributions from the value chains that will be created from those agro clusters. When you have these guys, all they do is train them properly and post them back to their communities. Let me tell you, the Zamfara state governor said something very interesting. If there is political will and the people are empowered, the bandits are known. They are not unknown government, just like we call them in the Southeast. They can be decapitated in 2 weeks because the people will pursue them and will destroy them. When we do this, we've done the numbers. To set up this will take about $3.75 billion. The current expenditure will take about $1.6 billion annually to run them. From those agro clusters, it will take about $6 million to develop those agro clusters under a missions community development private-public partnership framework. If this is $15 billion investment, we can borrow this fund tied to this project, not like the $3 trillion that was printed and looted. By the way, from each clusters, we will have annually over $42 million revenue. That is $109 million revenue and productivity. We will have 99% food self-sufficiency and we'll be able to export nothing less than $200 billion agro commodities. We will have indigenous securities that will match the criminals, the bandits, ISWAP, Boko Haram, the militia bandits, fire to fire, lawful terror, the task on lawful terror. We will tackle that. On the oil and gas sector, we know what to do. Obasanjo saw this before he left in 2007. We will follow the Petrobras route, unbundle NNPC. NNPC, as it is today, is a nest of criminals and criminality. Follow the Petrobras. Federal government must, today is valued about 60 billion NNPC. Divest federal government 72% shareholding there. 30% to core investors, 42% to Nigerians. List on the floor of the exchange. Do IPO of $20 billion. When you do this, we will have over $60 billion coming to the federal account. And NNPC will become efficiently run like Petrobras, like the liquefied natural gas of Nigeria. And if you do this, new investment will come into Nigeria. We have an oil reserve of about 37 billion barrels. We have a gas reserve of about 206 trillion that could be fit. We are a rich, gas-rich country. When you open that space up, those refineries that have not been working will work. Output will go back to 2.4 million barrels a day, even 3 million barrels. And now we amend the laws. We will not allocate marginal fuel again to anybody who will just extract and export crude oil. For you to get marginal fuel or to get OPL, you must set up refineries here. With this arrangement, we'll be able to meet our OPEC quota and have enough food production that will refine and take over the sub-Saharan African market. On the maritime side of blue economy, we can generate about $27 billion. And it's very simple to do. Nigeria is a transshipment hub for West Africa. with a waterway, coastal waterway of almost about 800 kilometers. We would tweak our activities at the MPA, at the MASA, at whatever they are doing in that sector, in such a way that the whole of Sub-Saharan Africa will begin to import through Nigerian ports. We'll bring efficiency in that place. Customs should not be responsible for revenue collection. Customs should stay at the border, not in the hinterland and at the exit port. Revenue collection should be streamlined and centralized in such a way that and be digitalized, so that over 80% of the leakages are stopped. These are some of the things. Let me tell you, to fix Nigeria economy is the easiest thing to do. We have everything going for us. We can make this economy work. We can restore Nigeria and turn this economy from the current $192 billion sized, according to World Bank projection, to $1 trillion in the next 10 years. If we have the right people with the right head, at the different MTAs and across the different governance centers in Nigeria. But the problem we have, and that problem remains, that the current gladiators across the 3 tiers of government are still doing repeat race of what happened under Buhari over the last 8 years.
We have like less than a minute. If you can answer this question, please, as quickly as possible. You know, there are several recommendations made by the World Bank, one of which is social protection, the conditional transfers will come into conversation. Is that a sustainable plan, protecting the vulnerable through conditional transfers?
World Bank is part of the problem in Nigeria. Nigeria does not need most of this, their warped colonialist mentality and advice to survive. Nigerians are not lazy. Let me tell you, Olive, the average Nigerian with his limbs and hand and legs intact, with his sight and thinking faculty intact, can easily produce 300,000 naira revenue every month if gainfully employed. I will show you sector by sector things we can do to create over 60 million jobs annually in this country. This conditional cash transfer that was introduced under Buhari, this Babiala mentality, will not save this country. I've never seen any country that has ever exited poverty through this cash transfer. China never exited poverty through cash transfer. China exited poverty through massive literacy, education, and knowledge of their people. The same thing with Singapore. Go and look at the 10 most developed economies. They have literacy level, knowledge-driven economy, 98%. The first thing we would do, just like Osadege said, we must constantly amend our constitution to ensure that we will insert in the constitution 45% of every of our revenues and borrowings must be invested, 25% in education, 20% in health, so that we will not have avenue for this kind of. If we have investment in education and make it compulsory, it is punishable for 1 year imprisonment without option of fine if any child, the parent of any child, allows him or her not to be in school, to have basic primary and basic primary education is forced within the purview of the state and local government. It must be compulsory qualitative education at the primary and secondary level. If we can do this and embrace technical and vocational education like the Chinese, I tell you, in 1 year, in 5 years, we will have less than 1 billion people in Nigeria, if not less than that.
All right. Well, I mean, the current administration, has, it's a work set out for it. A lot of people have argued, that if we're not doing anything different, then, we shouldn't expect to see any positive or different, results in the next couple of years. Nobody, really is patient enough to wait 10, 15 years, like the World Bank Vice President has said, but we currently don't have a choice. In another year, as we all know, majority of conversations is going to be about 2027 elections, not even about governance anymore. Would have moved on from governance to just politics. So it's tough. But Nameka Obiari, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thanks for speaking with us. We, of course, wish you a great day ahead. Look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And moving on, the Association of Telecommunications Companies of Nigeria, ATCON, has rejected plans by the federal government to reintroduce a 5% excise duty on the telecommunications sector, warning that the move could significantly burden the industry. Now, according to the bill, the excisable amount will be based on the service provider's charges, whether monetary or otherwise. The federal government proposed a 5% excise duty as part of a new bill to overhaul Nigeria's tax framework. The same rate will apply to gaming, gambling, betting, and lottery services. Now, we'll tell you more after this short break, and of course, keep the conversation going. Stay with us.
Now, still talking about the National Association of Telecommunications Subscribers, NATCON, and how they have rejected the reintroduction of 5% tax. They have called on the Nigerian Communications Commission, the NCC, to approve a marginal 10% tariff increase for telecom companies to alleviate the rising operational costs in the sector. Joining us this morning is Public Affairs Analyst Dayo Akintoli. Good morning. Good to have you.
A very good morning to all our viewers. Good morning to you both.
All right. If you remember last year, I think 6th of July to be precise, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had, excluded certain items from tax, and telecommunications was one of them. And now that there are conversations about the possible reintroduction of 5%, we've seen the pushback, from the telecommunications sector. So, let's get your thoughts first on that.
Well, we wouldn't expect the telecom sector to really be happy with this because they've been pushing for a tariff increase for the longest. They haven't increased our telephone prices in about 11 years compared to things like electricity and fuel that have gone up all along. Tariff increases have remained pretty consistent for quite a while. Now, the operational costs of the telecoms companies has been on the uprise, especially things like diesel, which they use to run their base stations. Things like vandalism are costing them a lot of money. And so they've been appealing to the government to allow them to increase tariffs, and government has said no. And they said, okay, we'll continue to try. Even yesterday, the MD of MTN made a public statement that if they're not able to increase tariffs very soon, MTN could actually conceivably shut down in Nigeria. So they're on the ropes, they're in dire straits. And then they now see government asking them to increase their prices by 5% to the consumer on something that's not going to benefit them at all because they're collecting that money for the government. Who will get the bad PR? The man on the street will say, oh, Airtel has increased its prices, MTN has increased its prices. So as far as the consumer is concerned, they say that it's the provider that's increasing the prices. They don't care that the money is going to the government. So the service providers are saying, why should we take all the flack from our subscribers for something that's of no benefit to us at a time when we're really struggling and need to be permitted to increase our tariffs, and there's objection to that. So I can understand why the telecom companies are against it.
Give us a further breakdown, if you can, because I remember during the Nigerian Economic Summit, a representative from MTN, I believe also, I hope I'm not wrong, was, present and, had the same complaints about how tough, the climate has been for them, and of course, they're not certain how much longer they will stay. And normally, if you think about, MTN, for example, you would expect that they're making trillions and trillions of naira, from Nigeria. There's absolutely nothing to complain about. But even them are complaining. Pretty much the same thing with the representative from Cadbury, Nigeria, also at the Nigerian Economic Summit, complaining bitterly about, how tough things are for them. So tell us about telecoms, and how tough really is it for them? What things are taking the most of their running costs?
Well, diesel primarily, and security as well. And their argument is that due to the floating of the naira, that has escalated costs on things like diesel and things like equipment maintenance and repair, which are all dollar denominated. And that if you look at it, what they were paying in cost 10 years ago, when the current tariffs were fixed, that their costs have tripled and quadrupled from 10 years ago till now, but they've not been able to increase their revenue. And when they take similar services like electricity and fuel that are utilities, just like their utility, and the way those costs have risen, they've commensurately been able to increase the revenue, the amount that they charge. But that's not the same with the telecoms company. So there is some validity to the claim that they're not making as much as they used to make, and it is very difficult for them to break even these days. And so now imposing upon them an excise tax that will be of no benefit to them is completely a downside to the telecom services because they're not getting anything out of it, but they will get the negative public perception for the increase. So they say rather than that, allow us to increase our tariffs rather than putting this burden on us to collect this tax for you, which essentially is what the government is doing. They're saying we need things like tax breaks, we need things like subventions on power and insecurity, because a lot of their base stations are vandalized and their generators are stolen, their diesel is pilfered. And so these kind of things lead to the financial dire straits that they find themselves in today.
So what would there be the possibility if the government doesn't pay attention to this pushback and the excise tax is actually reintroduced, what will that look like for the telecom operators, across all the different service providers?
Well, the thing is, it will naturally lead to a price increase automatically, because that 5% is going to be passed on to the subscriber. So it will reflect in the tariffs that we pay, not just for telephone calls, but even for your data that you buy. You'll see the cost going up. Essentially, 500 naira will still buy you 500 naira of airtime, but you get fewer minutes for it. Same thing with data. You'll get less bandwidth for the amount that you buy. And that, of course, coming at a time when Nigerians are going through the hardest times in recent memory in terms of running costs, what it costs to have a good quality of life on a daily basis, as it is. In spite of the increase in minimum wage, Nigerians are still struggling very hard to make ends meet. And at this time, we need less of anything that's taking away from our pocket. What we want is more into our pocket and less coming out. And this excise tax introduction, it should be classified as an essential good, basically.
I'm not even sure if it's, about seeing it as luxury. I think it's more of, just scrambling for new ways to, raise more money, increase, taxation here and there, create new tax, ideas and concepts, that you can impose on the people, to raise more money. We're going to get to that, but, it's also important to mention, that everyone who has paid attention to the Nigerian telecom sector, would notice that there's one or two that are struggling, really, really struggling. If you walk into, I wouldn't call their names, you walk into the offices, you see their staff sitting there the whole day, probably one or two customers walk in, because they haven't been able to expand in so long to, get new customers, a new customer base, or expand on their services because of how tough it is, for them. But let's talk about the Nigerian government itself. It's almost every 4 market days, there's conversations about a new tax, a new duty that is being imposed in one sector or the other. Do you think that, do you expect that this is going to be the new norm? Because as it stands, we almost have no other choice but to tax the people.
Well, I think it's common public knowledge that the costs that government needs to run its operations, we're not deriving enough revenue to cover the cost of running the government by way of both social services, running costs of government. The government's not getting enough revenue. So it's getting creative and looking for non-oil vehicles or means by which it can raise more money for itself to be able to provide all the services it needs to provide. The approach it seems to have taken or prefers to take is to find ways to extract money from the populace. I would say that that's probably an indolent way to go about it, that there are probably more efficient, less painful methodologies. For example, cutting cost of governance. All of you talked about that last time I was here. That probably should have been the first approach, because by the time they cut the cost of governance in about half, we probably can fund everything we need to in this country that we're looking for money now. But government has taken a relatively lazy approach and says, well, we got 200 million telephone subscribers in this country. There are 205 as of today active telephone lines. If you take 5% from every phone call, from every purchase of data, that's an astronomical amount of money that can come into government's coffers just like that. So rather than put the nose to the grindstone and get creative and innovative about ways to expand non-oil revenue, remember that the president himself, when he was campaigning, said we will expand the tax net. And this presidential committee on tax reform that he set up, headed by Taiwo Oyedele. And what's funny, I found out just a few days ago that when Taiwo Oyedele was in the private sector, when he was a partner in one of the top 5 accounting firms, when this tax was first introduced in 2022 in the Buhari administration, he stood up against it. He kicked against it. And he said, no, the timing is wrong. It'll put hardship on the people in 2022.
So what has changed between then and now?
Yeah, but look at where we were in 2022 and where we are today we're in 10 times worse shape today than we were when he kicked against it. And here you find his committee recommending it to pass now. So what exactly has changed? Is it political? Is it that he's affiliated to the incoming administration? And then again, something else that befuddles is that when it was brought up in 2022, The immediate past Minister of Telecoms, Issa Pantami, fought against it, fought tooth and nail against it, saying that the industry couldn't afford it, the industry would collapse. And he went to President Buhari and got it stepped down. This government came in, and President Tinubu had to put it aside in 2023. And it shows that there's policy inconsistency, because if the previous administration had already said, okay, this is a bad idea, we're not doing it, and they killed it completely. Now we've got a new administration in the same party. Imagine if we're a different party. Part of Nigeria's problems is we take 2 steps forward and we take 3 steps backwards, because a policy that's already been analyzed to be of negative benefit and has been stepped down by an administration gets reintroduced by the next administration of the same party. So part of Nigeria's problems is policy somersaults, because there's no consistency. I remember just a few days ago, there was the talk about the Red Line, the train in Lagos, and how during the previous administration, the immediate past governor of the state had essentially stalled the progress of the Blue Line that was started by his predecessor. So I think part of our developmental problems is the fact that there's no continuity in governance. Especially what makes it all the more egregious is when you have the same party.
And the same party that part of their campaign was that they were going to consolidate on the work that was done by the previous administration, seen as they're from the same party. Since we've started talking about tax, the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms have introduced the personal income tax bill, or they are seeking to introduce it, and that would sort of change how taxation is being done here, the consolidated revenue allowance, and then give 25% tax to those who are earning above 50 million annually. What would this mean for, first of all, I think the question is, who is the target? They would argue oftentimes that Nigeria doesn't have any middle class anymore. Do you think that the middle class would be the ones to suffer this tax bill, should it fly? And what will this mean for Nigerians?
Well, part of the carrot that's been put out in that tax bill is the fact that the very low-income people will be exempted from tax. Now, in most industrialized countries, the very wealthy generally pay more tax to subsidize the less capable. I think that's what this tax reform bill is trying to achieve. I thought it was 100 million, you said 50, but I thought that what the bill recommends is that those who are earning 100 million and above have to pay 25% in tax out of that income. Well, there's a moral argument that has raged over the ages, where some people say you can't penalize achievement, that what you do when you make people who have through their entrepreneurial bent and creativity generated a lot of wealth, if you penalize them by making them pay more to subsidize those who probably had the same opportunity but didn't do as well, what it does is it discourages entrepreneurship. It creates more opportunities for people to take their money offshore and go and hide it in tax havens. There's tax avoidance schemes. People will start getting creative because they think it's unfair for their success to be penalized. However, on the other side of the argument, and like I said, it's raging even in the industrialized countries, is, so how about those who genuinely didn't have the same opportunity as those who made it, those who really need a leg up, who need assistance? Where do they get it from? Who is that? Who is that that's capable to be? So there's income redistribution all over the world, generally, where those who are well off subsidize those who are less well-to-do. You look at the issue of this subsidy, for example, fuel, where they said it was benefiting only a few of the rich people and that the poor people were not getting anything out of it, but the poor people were the ones taking more public transportation, and they were the ones who were actually benefiting more from cheap fuel, but it was the rich that were paying for it. So it just depends on how you look at this issue of taxation generally. The idea behind taxation, a lot of times it's not properly implemented, is that if we all pool our resources together, the unit cost of buying social services drops, as opposed to if we're buying it individually. You in your house, you're paying for your gate man, which is your security. You are paying for your own water, which is your borewell. You're paying for your own electricity, which is your generator. If you, me, and Olive put our money together and bought all three of those services in bulk, to share, our unit cost will drop. That's the whole purpose of taxation.
Which does make sense in
Absolutely.
a situation where the citizens do feel like this taxation is fair. I think that part of the argument would be that, okay, if they bring up the UK, for example, where they say you're taxed for almost everything, for water, for even using the television, for you want to park your car, you want to drive your car, you have to pay different tolls, different tax rates. But then the people, Nigerians will tell you that the quality of life there cannot be compared to the quality of life that they have here. So whilst in no way are we discouraging people from paying tax, it's important to pay tax. But what can the government do to encourage Nigerian citizens to pay tax? Because, like I mentioned earlier, people just feel like, I'm paying tax to what end? I'm not seeing what my money is doing.
There's a trust deficit because over the years, government has never really done what it should do with taxes. So it's trying to put the cart before the horse by saying, pay your tax, trust me, I'll do the right thing with it. And people are saying, no, do the right thing first before we pay our taxes because you've disappointed us so many times in the past. A lot of these monies have been diverted, a lot of leakages, a lot of corruption, to where in 2024, why should I still be paying for my own security? Why should I still be paying for my own water? Why? And then I'm providing all my services and you still want me to pay tax to you. You failed as a government to provide the basic necessities for life. And you still expect me to be able to give you the money when you failed to provide the very things you're supposed to give me the money with. So until government can overcome or find a way to cure that trust deficit and let people begin to believe in it. And I think one thing that will go very far towards doing that is for government to lead by example. Cut the cost of government. Look at this whole hoopla about CNG vehicles, for example, that's been over the last couple of days. I would have expected government in the announcement they made yesterday to say, we're converting all government vehicles to CNG. That would be one way to encourage Nigerians to embrace the technology. But they want us to do it, and they're not doing their own. Yeah. So even the minister, the person in charge of the committee, that the president that made the announcement yesterday, he's driving a petrol-fueled vehicle.
They don't.
So
they obviously don't seem very serious.
It's basically
it's not a serious
do what I say, not do as I do.
Absolutely, and that has no moral foundation whatsoever. Nobody's going to buy it.
Even though it's important to mention, that the CNG conversion, is optional.
Yes.
If petrol is too expensive for you, then convert CNG, and the government can argue that, well, your petrol is not too expensive for us, so we don't have to all convert, But like I've continued to mention, that the government has not done enough to encourage Nigerians, to first of all, the safety aspect of it, and then the whole idea concerning converting to CNG. And many Nigerians, of course, know the way that things always go in the country, which is, right now, it is being marketed as a cheaper option.
Yes.
But give that 6 months, give it 1 year at most, it's going to be competing on the same level with petrol.
Absolutely.
If we're not careful, because that's the way that the Nigerian thing always works.
Yes.
Plus the safety concerns. I want you to speak a little bit more about leakages. I like what you mentioned about policy somersaulting.
Yes.
During the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, one of the people that I spoke with, a board member of the NSG rather, Nanaude, said the same thing, that we have a problem with one policy starting, and then being cut off by the next government. We never seem to make any progress. But speak about leakages. My argument is that Nigeria loses more money through leakages in government offices, MDAs, billions and billions of naira that really are meant to go into government coffers, but somehow, some way just get filtered away. What's it called now? The inflated budgets, inflated prices for contracts across the whole country. It's a major, major problem with Nigeria's funding. So tell us a little bit more about that. How can we stop leakages or block leakages and earn Nigeria more money?
Well, I would have thought that agencies like the EFCC and the ICPC, that their focus should more primarily be on areas of government revenue that is finding its way into other sources outside of government coffers, which is a big problem. When we keep talking about cutting the cost of governance, everybody's initial focus is, don't buy a presidential jet, reduce the number of vehicles in your convoy, consolidate some of the ministries. Before we even get to physical cuts, if we could find a way to stymie the illegal outflows of government revenue, I'm sure we would save a lot more than what we could save even just from consolidating ministries and reducing running costs. I think the biggest drain on Nigeria's revenue is the illicit flows of government revenue that is not finding its way into government accounts.
I completely agree with that.
And it's been a hydra-headed monster for decades that many administrations have failed to address. I think the political will just is not there because I think our political class themselves are in office primarily for the leakages. I think public service is a very secondary objective to the majority of those administering our country. I don't think that, therefore, there is a clear pathway or a clear, strong desire to address the notion. I mean, I would say that the ones who are there, actually the ones who are playing the bigger role in contributing to the drain. So it goes against the very notion of what their purposes are for them to take on this monster and really fight it to the ground. So there'd have to be a whole-scale change in orientation, perhaps a whole-scale change in those who are holding the suffrages and running public offices, which goes back to the electorate itself in terms of those we appoint or elect to lead us.
Okay, I think my final question would be going back to the conversation that began all of this, the National Association of Telecommunication Subscribers and companies of Nigeria. Now that the 5% excise bill might be reintroduced, you mentioned how in the past administration, the minister fought against it, fought tooth and nail. Do you see that happening here again, or is it something that it's a Kesera situation, nothing can be done about it?
Well, the telecoms people have said they're going to go and see the minister, Bosun Tijani, to essentially appeal to him to step in for them. The way I see it is, in this administration, looks like there's no coordination between the different sectors. Before this kind of a tax was proffered at all, the different stakeholders should have been engaged. I mean, this is a telecoms tax. The telecom stakeholders, I'm not sure they were carried along. The tax reform committee who put it forward, how much did they know about the reality of the telecoms sector at this time? Did they sit down with these people and discuss? Did they look at the history to know that this was shelved before in the past? I think that the overriding philosophy of this government is to generate as much non-oil revenue as is possible. So I'm not sure how easy it will be to turn this back, even though when you consider the cybercrime levy, when there was an outcry, they stepped it down. But guess what? It's back in this reform bill as well. Again, we're probably going to see that cybercrime levy in this new tax act of 2024. So the odds are not very good because I think this government desperately does want to find other ways to raise revenue. And once they've locked onto a particular way of getting money, they usually stay the course.
Dayo Akintobi, it's always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Fingers
always.
crossed, I guess the next few days, weeks, we'll see what exactly becomes of this proposal and what that will mean for you and I with our data and our calls and all the likes.
Yes, indeed.
Let's share with you a recap of the conversations that we've had this morning on Breakfast Central and then share with you what's coming up next. This morning on Breakfast Central, Nigeria loses 16 years economic gains under Buhari, says World Bank. Naimeka Obiariri joined us to have that conversation. Telecom firms reject 5% excise tax reintroduction. The conversation we just concluded with Dayo Akintobi. And inside Federal Teaching Hospital Lokoja, the staff crisis, not a good look for the medical and the health sector. Well, let's share with you what's coming up next this morning on Breakfast Central.
Court holds Kano local government election as it bars police participation. Also, the newspaper front pages, the major stories making headlines across Nigeria this morning. And also, which way Nigeria?
Welcome back to Breakfast Central. We reviewed the newspaper front pages, and this is a point where we open the phone line so you can get to call if there are any stories that you'd like to react to and give your commentary. Please Call the numbers on your screen. And remember to turn down the volume of your TV set or your device, whatever device you're streaming the show live from. We begin this morning with the Daily Times newspapers. On the front page, Nigeria has disappointed Africa. Black race, says Obasanjo, blames poor leadership, regionalism, disunity. And you can see a picture here. This is the flooded areas in some parts of Bayelsa State due to rising water levels in the Orachi River, the Niger River, and their tributaries. Child cancer issues on the rise as Luth records 300 cases in 1 year. That's very alarming and should be investigated. Nigeria lost more than $500 million to cybercrime in 2022, according to the EFCC. Edo grows revenue by 370% in 8 years, targets 120 billion naira internally generated revenue. Constitution review, House to engage NGF, NGE, LG chairman, CSOs. Former Reps member Farouk Lawan completes jail term and regains freedom. Parents of minor killed by NDLEA officers seek intervention of National Assembly. Senate investigates NDLEA over drug allegation against Deputy Senate leader. That story of parents of the child killed by NDLEA officers, such a sad story. But that's all I have on the Daily Times. Let's move now to the Daily Independent newspaper.
This morning on the Daily Independent, it says the federal government plans increase in oil production to ease FX inflow and stabilize the naira. Says Nigeria on track to meet 2 million barrels per day before end of 2024. Explains why banks can't lend at single-digit interest rate. Again, I think, the big question really is, how do we end oil theft in Nigeria? Can, the Nigerian government at this point, claim that it has reduced the theft of Nigeria's crude? If you remember also, a couple of months, ago, during was it the Buhari administration, when we discovered that very long pipeline that, was said to be stealing, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of barrels of crude oil, from the Niger Delta. And of course, we suddenly, didn't know who to arrest or who to prosecute, or, who, didn't know that there was a pipeline there all the while. That one of the world's largest oil producers didn't know that its crude was being stolen for many, many years. I always wonder where shame has gone when we read these stories. Also on the Daily Independent this morning, Supreme Court reserves ruling in 19 state suits challenging EFCC's legality. IMF downgrades Nigeria's 2024 economic growth forecast to 2.9%. Not a very bright story there. Federal government housing project for judges, systemic bribery, says Huriwa. And I did speak about this yesterday, but from a different angle. When the story came up yesterday, and I said, I wasn't sure why there was that fanfare. It's not such a huge deal, that you're building houses for judges. If this was some economic development project that was going to be affecting the masses, Nigerians in general, if you were, investing in rail lines or investing in healthcare, it probably deserves fanfare. Maybe even doesn't. In a sane society, that doesn't deserve any fanfare. We shouldn't be cutting ribbons and things like that. But this is where we are. Not, compared rather now to when you're building houses for judges. But Huriwa is pointing out a very important aspect of it, which is that it's systemic bribery. And you can't really not see what the point is that they're making there. It's the same way that we react when we hear that state governors are building courts or buying SUVs for judges. We see these things every now and then. There's a state now, I think it's budgeting 31 billion naira, I believe, to build courts in the state. Every now and then you hear about lawmakers in the state being given SUVs. It happened in River State, I believe, under Nyesom Wike. And it's not the only one. There's many other state governors who have given their lawmakers, their State House of Assembly members SUVs, and the judges as well. And I don't think it is right. You can't not see that and point to the flaw in it. I haven't lived extensively in other countries in the West, so I can't really say that I'm certain that the UK Parliament doesn't buy SUVs for for its parliamentarians. But I don't think that they will.
So maybe I feel differently about the ones for judicial officers. Lawmakers, I can see that because judicial officers are not even paid well enough. Do you know how much?
Well, then pay them better.
Well, maybe that, yes. They don't pay them half as much as the legislators earn. So for me, the one of the legislators seems very, very flamboyant because they have like these exorbitant sums. One day you're hearing 1 million, another day you're hearing 14 million. We're not talking about all the other allowances that they get. Judicial officers, sometimes you see the kind of courts. Have you been to like some courts in Nigeria? You will cry because you're inside courts, there's no fan, there's no, like it's ridiculously hot. And then this person stays there from morning till afternoon, evening, and they have to sit and pay attention to all the cases. Some of these courts are below, they should not even be called courts in Nigeria. So there's a lot that needs to be done with the judicial sector. Maybe part of the argument would be, how can we then fine-tune our processes in such a way that the judiciary is solely responsible for providing the things that it needs for itself, as opposed to depending on the executive in this case. So where we're hearing governors buying for the judges, because in that case, how independent would you then say the judiciary is? But the counter-argument to that would be they all need to check each other for checks and balances. But really, I would say that what we can do is find a way to ensure that there is at least a fairly equal payment across board, as opposed to these ones are living a life of luxury, these ones are living a life of penury.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that you can't ignore the point that Hurua is making, and it's not saying that judges, should live in huts or, should not be well paid, or our, law courts, should be in shambles. Nobody wants that. But, when a government specifically takes out time, and says, oh, I'm going to be building courts for judges, we're spending 40, I'm not sure how many billion naira now, just to build these premises for judges. Those weren't even courts. I'm not sure what they were.
No, those ones are housing,
exactly.
Yeah, residences for judicial officers.
When you see a government do that, you cannot ignore, that there is a flaw, in that. But we'll see. Senate probes NDLEA's claims of finding drugs in senator's home. Also, Jigawa tanker explosion. This is one of the saddest stories that we've heard in the last long while here in Nigeria. And the worst part of it is how Nigeria and Nigerians simply just moved on to, their regular daily activities. Like this wasn't a big story. 181 people, died in the tanker explosion in Jigawa State. It says 80 in critical condition, 210 families affected, and that's from the governor. Again, it's one of the saddest, and I don't know that it is normal, the way that we simply just moved on from it, like it's not a big thing. There wasn't any national day of mourning or anything that looked like it. It didn't, necessarily become the biggest headline across the newspapers right from when it happened. And I don't think that is also normal. It's also a reflection of where we are as a society, where we can have more than 100 people die in such a disaster, and it's not the singular biggest conversation across the country, that 100 Nigerian lives have been lost. In 2024, Nigeria and Nigerians have no reason to still be having such fire disasters, from tanker explosions. I mean, if you remember in the late 90s when there was a Jesse fire disaster and some of all of that, those ones that was an era where we can argue that that's where Nigeria still was. But in 2024, it's embarrassing that we still have similar incidents.
All right.
All right. I think these are the major stories on the Daily Independent this morning.
All right, let's look at This Nigeria newspaper. On the front page of This Nigeria, Senate summons NDLEA over illicit drug claims against senator. Constitute a 6-member ad hoc committee to investigate allegation of banned substances found in Ashiru's Kwara residence. Zamfara court declines ex parte order by PDP governors to hold NEC meeting and remove Damagum. Supreme Court reserves judgment in governor's suit on EFCC's legality. Federal government seeks dismissal of case as Anambra, Adamawa, Ebonyi back out. Jigawa tanker accident, death toll rises to 181, says Governor Namadi. That's all that we have on the front page of this Nigerian newspaper. If there are any of the stories that you would like to react to, please remember to call the numbers on your TV screen.
All right.
I think we can talk about a few of the paper stories, but I want to talk about the less obvious ones. One on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper. If you look at the Daily Times, at the top of the paper, you can see parents of minor killed by NDLEA officers seek intervention of National Assembly. Now, the parents of a 2-year-old boy, the name of the boy is Ivan Omoria, and he was shot and killed, and his younger brother, Ramonsele, was shot in the eye by men of the NDLEA. This happened July 13th, 2023. And when it happened, there was an accidental, it was a fire, there was a raid going on in the Upper Nam area of Delta State, and bullets from the NDLEA in Delta State shot and killed Ivan and affected Ramonsele's eye. And, you know, it was a heartbreaking moment for both parents. Now, right after this had happened, their boss had reached out, and according to the father of the children, or the father of the deceased, that the NDLEA boss had reached out to him, sent him 5 million naira, and said they should use the 5 million to take care of the son's eye, apologized for what had happened, and said they would right all the wrongs that needed to. I mean, there's no amount of money can really bring back the kids. But the parents are saying that ever since this attack happened, that the NDLEA has just abandoned them. This eye of their son has been deteriorating. No monetary compensation was being made for that. Mind you, there's no amount of money that can bring back a child, you know, that has been killed in this situation. NDLEA's defendant or lawyer, on the other hand, says that they had an agreement that they were going to pay 25 million naira to the parents, and that they had paid an initial sum of 5 million naira, and the remaining was going to be spread across 5 months. And when the court asked them, okay, if you say that they signed an agreement, where is the agreement? They couldn't produce a signed agreement. Their argument was that it wasn't signed, and the lawyer, the court, of course, did not have that. So I think it's just really double jeopardy for the parents. The fact that, one, they've lost a child. Two, they have another child whose health condition is deteriorating because of the carelessness of the NDLEA, because they went on a raid. Again, I mean, we're talking about this. Why I'm highlighting this story is because we are talking about arming FRSC officials. Yeah. In the course of raiding, we still have these accidental discharges, these conversations about live bullets hitting people. Unfortunately, 2 children have had to carry the cross and bear the penalty of this carelessness by the NDLEA. Until date, nothing has been done. So this is just highlighting the story that the NDLEA needs to do what needs to be done for the parents of Ivan and Ramonsele. The son has been killed. There's no denial here. They're not denying that this happened. I think the way forward is what is the compensation. And we must then learn, is it now the time to put weapons in the hands of law enforcement agents who ordinarily,
more law enforcement
agents who ordinarily have a problem with being able to exercise discipline and restraint on the road. You see that once they're on the road, they're acting a bit power drunk. Once, park, they just use the kind of car or their mood to gauge who they will stop and search, and they will tell you that it is their right to stop and search. And yes, it is. You know, they have a right to stop and search. So it's just really a very sad story. Yeah,
that's, you know, there's the part of the Nigerian mentality that is geared. I'm not sure if it comes from our military era, but there's a part of us that is always, not every Nigerian.
Seeking to oppress? Seeking to oppress,
yes.
Is a power?
You know, the fellow Nigerian. You know, there's control. Something, right? And it is worse when these individuals get armed. You would notice that immediately you give an individual a uniform, even if he's Megad, even if it's, you know, security at some estate gate in Lagos.
They feel all too powerful.
There's something, you know, and it's not all of them again, you know, I'm not, you know, painting all of them, you know, black, but there's something about the need to exercise some level of power and authority over the next person, especially when they, you know, are seemingly poorer than you are. That thing then becomes worse when you give these people an automatic rifle. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, and this is still a problem with our level of development, we still have not been able to develop our security agencies and our police and, in fact, security agencies generally to a level of training and equipment that doesn't require an AK-47 rifle. you remember, I asked Benjamin Hundeyi about this last time that he was here. That what are the different levels of training, and what is the different processes, that your officers are trained with de-escalating a likely protest or a peaceful protest? Is it from step 1 that says don't cross that line, step 2 is immediate tear gas, step 3 is live rounds? What exactly is it? We have failed to equip our police with both equipment and training in order for us to still be, for them rather, to still be able to de-escalate and control a situation without the need for an automatic rifle. And so it's dangerous to give these same people who don't have any human training, de-escalation training, and situational awareness, to be able to control the situation, give that same person an automatic rifle. What you're doing is increasing the likelihood that innocent Nigerians will be killed.
Because if you come back to even the story, Nigerian drug law enforcement agents, okay, you're going to carry out a raid, you've gotten information that someone has illicit drugs or they're trading in illicit drugs somewhere, doesn't necessarily then require you to start shooting sporadically? Like, where does that, how is the use of that? I mean, I don't have the full details to know maybe there was an attack and this was some form of a counterattack. But all this we're saying is, yes, we don't have sufficient training in terms of how to use weapons.
I mean, we could argue that, DEA and, other drug enforcement agencies outside Nigeria, they all, carry weapons. I was actually referring to the FRSC now, not the NDLEA.
No, I know. I brought that back. I'm talking about law enforcement in general.
But, the picture that I'm painting, the point that I'm trying to make is NDLEA can argue that the drug business is filled with hardened criminals. And so because of that, they require weapons. But on a broad scope, of Nigeria security agencies and everyone connected to them, even NSCDC carry automatic weapons. If we had a better trained and a better equipped security, agency across the country,
then that would be understandable.
You would realize that they have more facilities and infrastructure that doesn't require an automatic weapon. You'll be able to arrest. You will be able to tackle a situation, carry out whatever bust that you need to carry out, whatever raids that you need to carry, without the need for an automatic weapon.
Besides, you can actually shoot without shooting to kill. It's still part of the training. And it doesn't even have to be live ammunition, right? There are tasers, there are other things. Again, goes back to how equipped our law enforcement agents in being able to ensure, do they even understand the value of the Nigerian life? Because according to law, regardless of whatever crime you commit, you have a right to life. So if they understand that there is an actual value to Nigerian life, they would try their best to ensure that they're protecting you. Yes, they're trying to arrest you for whatever crime. They would rather incapacitate you for the moment as opposed to totally terminating your life. So I've had a policeman point a gun at me. What was the crime? I was driving and he was trying to get me to park. And then he pointed the gun at me. And I came down and said, why would you do that? He said the last person he tried to stop drove off. So he wanted to make sure that the next person. I said, the next person to park and you are pointing a gun at me. Make it make sense.
Yeah. So again, it's still just, a complete lack of infrastructure, lack of training, and lack of common sense, for many of all these people. But that's where we are. My point is mostly, if, there has to be an argument against anybody suggesting firearms for the Federal Road Safety Corps, it must be repeatedly said.
It must indeed be repeatedly said. We don't want to have a number of bodies. Nigeria is already dealing with a lot of challenges. People are tense. People are angry. The weather is too hot. What you don't want to do is to put an ammunition in the hands of somebody who will be standing under the hot sun from morning to night, checking papers and deciding what mood he is in for the day to either be nice or release a bullet. We need to do better, but we will continue to have these conversations. Let's move away from here now to Which Way Nigeria. We'll be right back after that.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed very heavy downpour yesterday in parts of Lagos, and maybe other parts of Nigeria. And yes, for those who saw the rains calm down, we eventually found out it wasn't actually rain falling, but the tears of millions of Nigerians pouring down as we watched a sitting senator from Abia North Senatorial District and former two-time governor of Abia State, Senator also since 2019 till date, Senator Orji Zakalu, who was convicted of a 7.65 billion naira fraud in 2019. He spent just a few seconds in the Ikoyi prisons and then walked free back to being a senator after the Supreme Court overturned his conviction. Now, that same senator complained just a few days ago about how his current 14 million naira salary as senator is just not enough. And I believe, of course, the same with other members of the Senate. Now, he is saying this as a senator in a country with a national minimum wage of a whopping 70,000 naira a month. In a country that has just about 2.4% of its citizens earning above 200,000 naira monthly. Just 2.4%. And so, yes, Nigerians were really broken and sad yesterday, filled with empathy for these senators. Everyone shedding a tear or two. These senators who have to manage a meager 14 million naira every month. Now, what we are seeing here is a clear indication that no matter how highly placed you are, a failing economy affects everyone. In 2012-2014, this 14 million naira monthly salary was equivalent to maybe about $80,000 monthly for Nigerian senators. And today, that same amount is maybe about $8,000. That is the reality of the current Nigerian economy. But before we start crying again and flooding the country with our tears of empathy for these senators who have to earn this very paltry sum, let's keep in mind that this is a country that its GDP has dropped from $574 billion in 2014 to about $252 billion today. But the last budget in this same economy still awarded almost 9 billion naira for senators' salaries and allowances. These same senators that are complaining today. And then about 25 billion naira was awarded for House of Rep members' salaries and allowances. This same country spent 57 billion naira on SUVs for these same National Assembly members, with a constant array of police orderlies and special assistants around them 24/7. The National Assembly Act states that each lawmaker, excluding principal officers, is entitled to 5 aides, 1 senior legislative aide, 2 legislative aides, a personal assistant, and a secretary. The office of the Senate President is entitled to 45 appointees, Deputy Senate President 30, House Speaker 33, Deputy Speaker 15, and principal officers 10 each. So again, it must be very tough and difficult being a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in these very, very trying times, especially for Nigerians with their whooping 70,000 naira minimum wage and 1,200 naira a litre petrol. Nigerians, right after wiping their tears, are even contemplating crowdfunding from their massive minimum wage so we can possibly increase the monthly earnings of senators from 14 million naira to maybe 50 or 100 million naira as it stands. Good morning, Nigerians.
Wow, top-tier delivery and acting from Osaoge Ogbonwa. I guess he knows now that if his career on TV doesn't work out, he'll head to Nollywood, and Nollywood will certainly have a space for him. But very, very thought-provoking piece there. Let's now move away into the politics of Kano State elections. A federal high court in Kano has barred the Kano State Independent Electoral Commission, KANSIEC, from conducting the October 26, 2024 local government elections. The court ruled that the chairman and the members of the commission are unfit for their roles due to their affiliation with the ruling New Nigeria People's Party, NNPP, and failure to meet civil service grade requirements. Justice S.A. Amobede delivered the verdict in response to a suit filed by Aminu Aliyu Tiga, a member of the opposition All Progressives Congress, APC. The judge declared that the defendant's involvement in partisan politics contradicts the 1999 Constitution and Kano State Independent Electoral Law Commission 2001. Joining us this morning is Lagos State Chairman of the African Democratic Party, George Ashiru. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my brother, my sister. Thank you. And Osaoge, I join you in wiping the tears. It's really, really terrible.
Well, sad.
Very, very sad. Now, we've come to a very interesting place. The elections were scheduled to hold this Saturday, but unfortunately, it does seem that the elections will not be holding. Who takes the blame, really? Where do we start from in terms of how we're just finding out now that the NNPP Kansiek is in a way related to the NNPP? And you know, what will be the implications of this? Are we starting over from scratch? Because a number of things have been reached. One is that the elections will not hold. Two is that, you know, the chairman, these people are not fit to hold the position that they hold due to their civil service roles. So are we starting again from the scratch in terms of distribution of election materials and all the likes?
I think it's a wonderful judgment. I'm actually quite happy that this has happened before all the major local government elections that are coming up next year. And one of the reasons this is important is that it goes back to what we're saying about the autonomy of the local government system. The fact that possibly state governors have to decide who will be chairman of the various state electoral commissions, independent they claim, that itself is already a challenge. So this court case allows that question to be answered probably once and for all. The moment the chairpersons and the members of the various councils and the commissions are decided by the governors, you can be sure that they will be appointees that are members or loyalists of the parties in each of the states. And that becomes problematic in terms of autonomy. You cannot get autonomy where the person that puts you there is directing. Now, we're seeing what's going on in Rivers State. We can see the challenge of having appointees that are made by people who are not elected by the people themselves. So clearly, this is one of the things that is very important, that we follow the Constitution rather than have a faulty election. It's very important that we follow the Constitution, because once we have a faulty election, you know what the Holy Book says. It says that once the foundation is destroyed, then what can the people do for going forward? So they let the courts make that distinction and let the right thing be done. And the elections, look, we're here for life, for forever and ever and ever. The nation Nigeria will exist for as long as this world exists. So we are not in a rush to do the right thing. Let's do it now.
Yeah, but how do you think we can break the cycle, across the whole country? Aside Kansiek, we pretty much will have the same situation in other states. But if you remember, in the Edo State elections, just before the Edo State elections, the PDP had complained bitterly about the resident electoral commissioner in Edo State being cousins with the FCT minister. They pointed that out. But, INEC and the courts didn't find anything wrong with it. And so they went on with the elections, that way. So how do you think that we can, ensure that we create this standard that once there is any doubt as to the credibility of any member, any person participating in the elections or handling the execution of the elections, that it would be immediately addressed?
I think one of the fundamental issues that we also have to deal with was the fact that the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as prepared in 1999, was prepared in a hurry by a military government. It's meant to be a reflection of the U.S. presidential system, but clearly it is not. We see the electoral college system in U.S. elections, which we don't have. So one of the reasons why we don't have that is because we have what we call a hybrid. We are practicing some kind of colonial administration using presidential system. So there are fundamental errors, and amendments need to be made into the Constitution itself. And it will now reflect further, some of these basic issues. One of the fundamental reasons why we have a faulty democracy in Nigeria is because we still practice a system where all power comes from the very top. And so no one is able to therefore address impunity because you are appointed by the same person that other people are asking you to address an issue that concerns them. So I think we have a fundamental issue regarding the way that the Constitution itself is prepared. Now, going forward, concerning the local government, look at Lagos. Lagos has 57 local institutions, 20 of which are constitutional. The other 37, nothing has been done to address it in over 20 years that they were instituted in Lagos. Nothing has been done to either make them functioning local government, nor, with this local government autonomy that that financial autonomy in particular, where monies are going to be paid to the 20 local governments, then what happens to the 37 extra local governments, local council development authorities? So these are all issues which the Supreme Court needs to start making pronouncements about. So the question for us is, who are the entities that can go and challenge the existence of these methodologies, processes, where the proposed new rules that are governing the future administration of local councils in Lagos is the State Assembly is requesting that the governor should be able to appoint the administrative secretaries of the 37 local council areas, according to the recent public sitting that they did. So some of these are clearly issues that I think need to be addressed all the way to the Supreme Court so that it becomes settled permanently as law.
All right, I'm going to read an excerpt from the ruling because, part of the conversation was the Secretary of Kansiek not being eligible to the position. It says, Kabir Zakirai, not being an officer in the Kano State Civil Service, not below the rank of director, before he was appointed Secretary of the Commission, is not qualified to be appointed to the position under Section 14 of the Kano State Independent Commission, Electoral Commission Law 2001. Having read that part of his ruling, I think the question now is, where should the blame be again? Because how did he even get appointed in the first place? And why did we have to wait until elections were just a few days away, or let's say a few weeks away, before we can then now have this matter being brought up? So how can we get to the point where if the person is not meeting the eligibility standards, they're not even appointed in the first place?
Well, I think we already have some aberrations in that a lot of state governors have imposed individuals in the civil service by not, they haven't gone through the process of the proper recruitment methodology in the civil service, which is you come in through level 8 or level 9, depending on your qualification, and then you grow up the system. So we have seen in many states, Lagos State included, where people have been taken from the private sector and then inserted as level 15, level 14, level 16 officers. And they didn't go through the process. So it then begets the question, what is the motive behind the governors imposing people from the private sector straight to the top of the civil service, whereas career officers who are being trained and prepared and knowledgeable about the policies of government exist in those places. And this exists in all the 36 states, I can assure you. And once this sort of thing is not addressed legally, challenged by the parties that are concerned, in particular, the various unions, labor unions, that are civil service labor unions, then you're going to have this situation where any governor can simply look at someone who is going to play the cards and the game that they want, impose them at level 14 officer and above, even if the person is qualified, but inappropriately inserted into the Kansiek system. It occurs in 37 states as well. It's just that this is providing us an opportunity for the others to challenge existing aberrations in the selection of people into those positions. I think there is a necessity that all the people heading all our electoral commissions, there must be an independent, transparent system for allowing them to come in, and must be competitive. People should not simply be appointed. It must be open. There must be open system, and there could be referendum. Even attorney generals in states, in the United States, are not appointed. They are elected. So why can't we also elect the chairman of these commissions? So there are so many things that we need to do to fix some of these problems. But for now, let the Supreme Court make some determination in the interim. Yeah,
I also want to bring in the perspective of jurisdiction. The court ruling disqualifying these members, is from the Federal High Court in Kano Judicial Division case. Now, tell us about this. The concerns that the Federal High Court should have no business discussing or handling a case in the Kano State Independent Electoral Commission. Is there a point to be made there? And of course, that these things could be occurring because of interest from the federal government and other players in what happens in Kano State.
Well, Kano State has been embroiled in a lot of interesting legal issues of recent. Remember the issue of the emirship, where there have been discordant pronouncements by various courts, including federal courts, and in what should be a local issue. I do think that, not being a legal entity myself and a lawyer, I would be very careful to make my own opinion. But I would think also that Since these are things that are connected directly with the state, then the state judiciary should be able to handle it. And it's only when it has reached the highest level of the state judiciary and there is no way forward, then you can then say, okay, look, the federal constitution itself is impacted. And if it's impacted, then it should be handled by federal high courts. But I do think I agree that the state's judicial institutions have the first right to determine the legality or illegality of an action.
Okay. George Ashiru, I mean, obvious we still have so much more work to be done as we continue to refine and modify and improve on our leadership recruitment process, federal, state, and local government level. But everyone is still trying to build some faith and some trust in the electoral process going forward. We'll see how things go. Thank you very much for joining us. Please encourage other members around you to please wipe their tears. Our senators will be fine. We'll continue to pray for them and see if we can raise more money. So we can raise more money for them, and improve on their monthly earnings. Thanks very much for joining us once again.
Thank you very much.
All right. We've had a pretty interesting Wednesday morning here on Breakfast Central. Of course, some of the important conversations that we got into. We spoke with Dayo Akintobi on the possibility of a reintroduction of a 5% excise duty on the telecom sector and what this means.
And how it's going to bite all of us. It's not just the telcos, because right now the telecommunications are speaking out. But by the time you're buying data and your data is finishing in hours and your call card is finishing in hours,
yes,
then you feel the impact. Because telecom, I mean, he did raise a valid point about how excise should be for things that are likely to be abused, things considered luxuries.
Yes.
Technology and data and, telcos, really, they're not luxuries, they're necessities. Yeah. They're a very fundamental part of our work, our life, and our day-to-day
It's also a way
business.
to discourage human action,
exactly.
And discourage, societal action on certain things. And telecommunications is definitely not one of those sectors.
So that's an interesting conversation. I'm hoping that the government does look into that and see if they are reintroducing 5% excise tax on lotteries, gambling. Even hearing how it's classified, lotteries, gambling, and telecommunications, they're not in any way related at all. Yeah. But away from that, we also went into Kogi State and talked about the state of healthcare in Kogi State and how it's not really looking good. Yeah. And that, again, is another area that needs to be revisited.
Much earlier, Naimeka Obiari joined us, and he spoke about the World Bank and its view on the Buhari administration. Same World Bank that, of course, kind of supported the Buhari administration, continue to give it loans when it requested in those 8 years. Now, of course, it's saying that the government threw Nigeria 16 years back. And, he started by saying that it's way more than 16 years, about 50 years back. People would even say more than 50, maybe 100 years like back. They don't have to like it, but what is true is true. Nigeria's economy dipped in, under his care. We currently, of course, we lost, an economy of $574 billion in 2014 to just above $250 billion in 2024.
And I think that the summary of it for me, the highlight would be that, yes, the government may say that they have good intentions for the people. I genuinely might believe that they do, but leadership is not just in words, but in actions. If they're going to be putting forth laws and, reintroducing excise tax and basically sort of trying to encourage Nigerians to pay more tax, individuals and businesses, then they must lead by example by, first of all, cutting the cost of governance. But that is a conversation that continues. Let's share with you what's happening later today as we exit the studio. 9 a.m. West African time, we bring you the news. 1 p.m. West African time, it's In the Game, and join us at 5 p.m. West African time for the conversation. Thank you for joining us on today's broadcast. We'll be right back. Same time tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. My name is Olive Emodi.
And I am Osaogi Ogbala. See you tomorrow.